A viewer asked me to do a design process video on how to develop a print, a textile design. And at first I was like, well, it's the same thing, isn't it? You know, concept, mood board, color, fabric. And then I started thinking about repeats and pulling colors for solids and merchandising back to the collection. And I was like, it's a whole nother video. Hi, darlings, and welcome to Textile Design Process and Logistics. And in this video, I'm going to talk to you guys about developing print designs within the context of designing a clothing collection. I'm sure that textile designers who just do straight up textiles, do not do clothing, have their own methods for what works best for their industry, which, you know, of course is related to just general clothing design, but I'm sure they have things that are unique to them. And I have a lot of experience developing prints, but it has always been, as a rule, as a clothing designer, you know, that was part of my job. I was never just hired as a textile designer where I just designed prints and sold them to someone else. Okay? So that's my experience, always within the general fashion collection I was building for the brand that I was working for. Little disclaimer, I call any fabric with a pattern on it a print, generally speaking. It's technically not 100% accurate because not all pattern fabrics are prints. Prints is a specific method, but I use the term prints. A lot of people use the term prints. I think it's because when we hear the word pattern, we think of, you know, the oak tag paper patterns that you cut and sew and things, right? So just a little note on that. All right. So how to acquire prints for your collection? When you are a student, you have a few options. One, you can go to the store and go get some. I've never purchased fabric online, but I know that a lot of my students have purchased from like BeBlackandSons.com and moodfabrics.com. Your mileage may vary, of course. And that's fine because people in the industry, they go to a wholesale fabric person and just buy prints from what they have all the time. Okay. You can design your own textile pattern and illustrate it on paper and then put it next to a swatch of the fabric that you would ideally print it on if you were working in the industry. If you have a textile design program at your school, you can either, you know, maybe go to the lab and see if someone can help you do a mock-up. If it's a more elaborate ongoing project, maybe you can pair up with a textile design student and work on that together. I have never done this myself, but you could also buy fabric paints and paint something on fabric. So those are some options in school, working on your portfolio. You know, when you're a student or a new grad, people who are looking at your portfolio, they understand that you have limited resources. Like, you can't go to a printer and be like, well, I need to work on my school portfolio and I designed this print for my collection for it. Can you print me a strike off? Like, people are aware that you can't really do that. So if you don't have that printed fabric in your portfolio, it's okay as long as you have created some kind of facsimile that will help the interviewer kind of understand what they're looking at. In the industry, you can go to your fabric sales rep, your distributor, your mill, you know, whoever you're talking to, right? And ask to see their printed fabrics. Now, under pain of death, seriously, guys, do not go to your fabric sales rep and say, I want to see all your prints. You could probably only get away with saying that if your fabric sales rep only repped one line. And even then, that's kind of really amateur sounding. You sound like you don't know what you're doing with your collection, and you sound like you're going to waste a lot of people's time. Okay? You want to have some focus before you meet with other people. Be like, okay, introduce yourself and be like, hey, so I design for the preteen girls market and I want to look at some dainty floral patterns that would look great on some lightweight cottons for my upcoming spring collection. Okay, so that's appropriately vague, dainty florals. That can mean a lot of things, but it's focused, right? You have a customer, a general customer, you have a season, and those things can really help other people help you look for what you need. Okay? So you can go to your fabric sales rep and ask to see what they have. And you might be thinking, well, Zoe, then everyone is going to have the same fabric as me. And I don't like other people having the same stuff as me. And I totally understand that. So here are a few things you can do. Number one, you can buy exclusivity from some companies. Some companies just won't do it. Some companies will. And by buying exclusivity, you would have to buy tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of yards. And you're like, yeah, no thanks. Yeah, it's not really the best option because you can't exclude all the people who have already bought the print before you came along. The company is not going to chase down whoever bought it before you and say, we gotta take that back. Okay, no one's gonna do that. Also, you have to consider the 10% rule. Okay, in textile design, all you have to do is change something 10% for it to be considered new and not infringing on any intellectual property law. Okay, so there's that. And somebody coming along and changing something 10% might not be enough for you. Your other option is to take the print, the design that your fabric sales rep has, and ask to recolor it. You can switch up the color to fit the color story that you had been working on with, all your other things back at your office. And it will merchandise back to your collection. Everything will work well together because they're all in the same color story. And your print will look really different once it's recolored. Color plays such a big part of how we view things. It's one of the first things that we pick up on, definitely before small design details, and sometimes even before the overall texture of something. So changing the whole colorway, especially if you change it drastically, will make it really look special to you. Another option is you can design your own. Now, before you get started on designing your own and spending a lot of time on that, number one, you need to determine whether you have time to develop your own print design. So you're working towards a season, right? You have a goal. You need to know how you're going to sell your line. Okay? Whether you're taking it to a trade show like Magic or you're handing them off to a sales rep who will in turn, do their own thing, or you're going to have a runway show. Whatever it is that you're going to do with your final samples, you need that date. You need that date of when you're going to be shipping your stuff off to Vegas, when you're going to be handing your final samples off to your sales rep. You've got that date, then you need to work backwards. You talk to your sample makers and your pattern cutters, and you get a time frame for how much time they need to cut and sew your final samples after they've received all the raw materials. Okay? 99.9% of the sample makers out there won't start making your stuff until they have all of your raw materials for those samples in hand. Okay? So you cannot be waiting for a zipper shipment while they're sewing. Okay? You might get someone to do that if they're sewing for you in-house. They're your employee, and so they'll do whatever you ask them to do. But if you are hiring someone out, they're not going to do it until they have everything. Okay, so how much time they need from when they receive all the raw materials to when they can give you the final samples. So you have that time frame. And so then you get your time frame from your fabric people we need this much time to get your design so that we can do the sample, the strike off. Okay, and then you're gonna need time to approve it, and then how much production time they need after you've approved the sample that it takes for them to do all the sample yardage and ship it to you. Okay, make sure you include shipping lead times on every single timeline you ever make. And then cushion everything. You got to pad everything, you know, always think, okay, you know, people like best case scenario when they're pitching sales to you. So make sure you pad here and there. And then whatever time you have left over, that's how much time you have to finish designing your collection and design your print, right? If you don't have enough time, don't do it. Obviously, right? You'll figure it out, okay? You know how fast you work on these things. You'll know. Okay, I cannot dictate that for you, but yeah, if you have only 2 days to develop a print, I would advise against it. Okay, and go with, you know, maybe recoloring an existing print. So when do you design your prints? You design them while you're designing the rest of the collection, because it is part of the rest of the collection. Decisions regarding your print should be involved with decisions regarding the rest of your collection. When you are pulling images for your concept, you should be thinking, not, you know, constantly like, is this a good print? Is this a good print? But always know, okay, I'm going to develop a print. What could be good inspiration for a print? You know, always have that little nugget of info in your mind. If you watch my interview with Dahe, you know that concept development can be a very different thing in the working industry than it is in school. And we don't always have to or have time for a perfectly finished, beautiful mood board. However, you should be still collecting some images to share with your team so that you guys are all on the same page in terms of the visual outcome of your collection. So as you're collecting these images, think to yourself, what could be a cool basis or inspiration for a print? If you watched the rest of the design process series, okay, and I'll link the playlist somewhere, then you might remember some of these images that I had pulled a long time ago when I first got started with this example project. And yeah, like look at this kind of stuff and be like, oh, that could be a cool print. Don't lift the whole thing, okay? But, you know, think of interesting elements that you might like here. Or maybe you don't like this particular graffiti, but you like the idea of something that looks vaguely like graffiti. Something like these two, where it's more focused on a single item, you might think, do I want a bunch of people? No? I don't know. I thought that looked kind of cool. Maybe take this, and then I put it on a repeat because I was trying to think of what it would look like, and kind of squint your eye and look at it more abstractly. Okay, so I was thinking about that too. Remember, I was looking at these old textiles, and I was looking at the color story, but also these really cool patterns where maybe these patterns done more subtly could be a background for other images layered on top. Do you remember our old window tool? Okay, where you can take something like this, because this image, I really love it because it has all these crazy light shadow things happening. And instead of taking it for the visual it is, which is a woman in a dress standing in the middle of the street, you can take your window tool and separate out cool images. Like maybe I want a print that looks like these crazy light streaks all over the place. Do you remember this original collage that we did in video number 2, where we went over mood boards and sketchbook development? Remember, I had drawn this out because I really liked the idea of all these wrinkles and a maze of squished fabric and stuff. Maybe this becomes your print or a basis for a print. You know how I had started working on tree bark texture meeting chicken feet scale texture and this sort of thing, you know, playing with your images and, you know, continuing to develop until you start getting some designs that you think would be a cool print that has the thematic elements and then has the color story kind of all woven with the rest of your collection. Next is colors. So when you're putting your color story together for your whole collection, remember how I said that all your colors have to look good together, even if a person is only going to buy one item from you per season. Okay, remember that, because you're presenting the whole collection, whether it's at a trade show or on the runway or in a lookbook, and so they all have to look good together. And then you're going to pull whatever colors you want from that to create your print. Or if you're not going to use the exact colors from the rest of your collection in your print, they have to complement. Okay? You can't have the blues that are the solid colors in your collection fight with whatever blues that you might have in your print, because they will hang together. You need to merchandise them together. And so if those colors fight each other, it won't look good together. Okay, so you have to compromise, work back and forth with the colors in your print and the colors in your solids and make sure that everything is harmonious. Once you have your color story for your prints and for your solids selected, you need to figure out your Pantone colors, get your color codes, so that you have that list of numbers and you can dye your solids to match. You can get your printer to match those colors. And so everything comes out looking the right color. If some of that was confusing to you, go watch my design process video on color and texture. I'm someone who finds inspiration while they're painting illustration. You know, sometimes when I'm doing these quick sketch croquis as I'm designing, I will paint one like as final and as beautiful as possible. Okay, not thinking that that's going to be what the final thing looks like, but because I kind of love painting. And it is a step in the process that I enjoy. I didn't mention it in the design process because it's something that's unique to me and it's not something that I recommend for everyone. But yeah, I'll pause and I'll paint a few out. And in the painting, I start making new decisions. Because now that I'm seeing a more final product, I'm like, oh, I didn't think about this. I didn't think about that. Or, oh, I don't like that at all. Okay? And so I find that doing final illustrations within my design process helps me. So when I was working on this particular project, I took my gouaches out and I started painting a couple of final illustrations. I had been developing a rose print, and I knew that I wanted the rose print to have the colors that I had my solids in, you know, playing it back. So I made these color chips for future reference. Okay, as I was painting the final, I made these big gouache chips. And yet another reason why I love gouache is you can really get that beautiful, intense, pure color. I mean, I've had these color chips for years. This project is, I don't know, like 7 years old, and the color chips still look amazing. I painted these chips for future reference. And so later on, when I was pulling final colors for the rose print and matching things up to my Pantone colors, I had these. And so I just had to figure out which ones I wanted to use and which ones were closest to the Pantone colors. Obviously, I wasn't going to use every single one of these colors. Like, these two are too close together. You know, I could have just done one of these, right? So I played around. Like, I had these all lined up, and I'm like, okay, I want a red, black. I like this dark red, you know, and I want a dark cream and this green as my backdrop. Okay, do I like that? Do I want an orange? Oh no, that looks crazy. How about this one? No, you know what? Never mind. I don't want orange. So I have these color chips to play with, with the illustrations, with my color chips. Like I have all these tools to play with to develop my work. You can also make similar ones in marker where, maybe you have a loose idea of a color story. You haven't tightened it up yet. And so you have markers for each of those and you make marker chips and then you start playing around and deciding, oh, what I like. And then you keep those marker chips so that you can, when you're pulling out your pen, oh, I wish I had one for you guys. I don't have one anymore, but when you are looking through the Pantone book and trying to match up your colors, you have these chips that are easy to use. And then next, you're picking fabrics. When you are at the fabric sales rep office and you see a print hanging there, you don't have to get that print printed on the same fabric. You can ask for a different fabric. You can pick something a little bit more pebbly like a crepe or a cotton piqué, or you can pick something really smooth like a Duchess satin. I wouldn't recommend you get too textured because the printing process may turn out, uneven. Make sure that you ask that it's going to be okay because they'll know better than you or me how the printing is going to go. You can also print the fabric on multiple fabrications for the same collection. Maybe you want to do the same design on a silk chiffon and also on a Duchess satin. And then after that, you can think about your bodies, your proportions, your shapes, your details, and all those things. Another thing that you can do is to take your print design and use the images to create other embellishments and designs for the rest of your collection. Okay. You can pull elements and create graphics to screen print on tees. You can create appliques. You can create different kinds of patches. You can design graphics that can be turned into debosses or embosses for leathers. You can create beading patterns, embroideries, other decorative stitching like smocking or sachiko stitching. You can pull elements from the print, create different embellishments to go on top of your solids to kind of bring all those thematic elements in your collection together. You can also do a secondary print, one that is related to your first print, but something simpler. And they don't have to look matchy-matchy, but something that's complementary. I've seen some cute things where people did a polka dot with a particular color story, and then they did a stripe, like a kind of a subtle stripe in the same color story, so that they merchandise back to the same collection. They were both geometric prints in the same color story, and they played well together. Here's a print I developed 100 years ago. You guys know how old I am, right? Because Asian don't raisin. This was the very first project I worked on at my very first real design job after college. On the first day of work, I went in. I spent 2 hours filling out HR paperwork, getting a tour of the office and kind of getting to know everybody. And then she sat me down in the kitchen because my desk wasn't even ready yet. And she gave me a stack of books, a couple of vintage kimono. And she's like, okay, I need a colorful feminine print. I'm thinking kimono. I'm thinking Art Nouveau elements. I want fairies. I want also like vibes of psychedelic rock poster art from the 60s and 70s. And of course, I'm like this fresh face, newbie punk, nervous first day. I'm like, writing notes as fast as I can. In the office kitchen. And then at some point, she asked me to include drawings of her dog and her sister's dog with fairy wings. Because you can't illustrate a drug-fueled explosion of design viewpoints without including a couple of flying dogs, apparently. This was hand-drawn. The final is marker and fine liner on Mylar. I don't actually know what I was thinking when I chose Mylar. I really don't remember, but I really haven't worked with Mylar since, and it might be because of that. Okay. The print has 19 colors, which is insane, and at the time made the print quite expensive. We printed it on silk chiffon, 2 different weights of charmeuse, and a stretched georgette. We pulled Pantone chips and made our solids the same colors. The company who printed the fabric also dyed our silk solids, so we just gave them all the 19 Pantone color codes, and we ordered yardage of the solids. Not every single of those 19 colors, like just the 2 pinks that we thought were the best for solid fabrics, the 2 blues that we thought were the best, et cetera, et cetera. We used a different dyer for cottons. This was a domestic dyer who specialized in cotton and modal dyeing. And so they used the same Pantone color codes so that our t-shirt fabrics and our silks would match up. We pulled elements from the design of the fairy print, and we created embroideries and appliques and silk screens for t-shirts, and everything went back to the same 19 Pantone colors. Okay, everything, so that everything harmonized color-wise. At some point, I had all 19 6-digit Pantone color codes memorized, and I could rattle them off like that. I'd write all these emails like, hi, how long would it take to order 100 more yards of item 4001 in Pantone 16-0105? Do you guys remember when you didn't have cell phones and you didn't want to carry your phone book around and you actually had to remember your friends' phone numbers so that you could call them? No? I know I have viewers who are older than me. I know a bunch of you guys are like 16 years old, but I know I have viewers older than me, and y'all remember, okay? I'm old enough to have had a rotary phone in my home. And you know what? If you had a bunch of zeros in your phone number, I automatically hated you because it would take too long to call you. And then we included the secondary print that related back to the original themes. Okay, if you look at the fairy print, you notice that there are a lot of sort of bubble scapes. And when we were visiting one of our fabric sales reps to think of a much more simpler secondary print, we saw these bubbles and we thought it worked back really well. And what we ended up doing was we used the bubble print, we recolored it using some of our original Pantone colors so that it would work back color-wise and thematically. I also took that bubble print and I turned it into an abstract butterfly graphic to be silkscreen on other t-shirts. And then we packaged everything into 2 delivery dates, the fairy print and the accompanying styles of embroideries and whatnot. That was spring 1. And then the bubble print and the abstract butterfly, that was packaged into spring 2, which was delivered a month later. Some things to consider when designing. Number 1, play with the scale. Big flowers or little flowers. Okay, you can play with the same flower. Maybe you're really into pansies this season. You think they're the prettiest thing and they work well with whatever theme you had been going on. Okay, so how is a print with little pansies close together gonna look different from large pansies? Okay, the scale of things really changes up your perception. Larger scale things tend to look bolder, especially if you pair that with stronger colors. Small scale, like little ditzy prints, Liberty prints, things like that, they have a softer, daintier, lighter look to things. So think about the overall image that you're going for and play with the scale. You can also have both. You can have a ditzy pansy print and you can have a larger, more bold pansy print and play with blocking those out in your designs. Number 2, play with different repeats. Okay, just for simplicity's sake, let's say that my design element is a half circle. Okay, so here's my half circle. And you could do a basic block repeat where it's just, they're all next to each other and neatly underneath each other. And you could do a repeat like that. You could do a brick repeat. You know how you look at a brick wall and you have a bunch of bricks and then they're staggered like this for strength. You can do a repeat that is a brick repeat where you have these set up like this and then you stagger them underneath. You can do a half drop repeat, which is like the brick repeat, but vertically. So you have your half circles in a column, and then you do a half drop and put down your column. Or you could do something where the design is so big that you're not really going to see a repeat. Okay, like let's say you have an A-line skirt and your flowers are so big that you don't really see a repeating pattern. I mean, you do, but that's not really the evident thing. But it's still a print, a repeating print across the fabric. You can also do placed prints where you have a design and the placement of the design is integral to the design of the garment. You can have things like that too, so play around with those options. You can also play with color placement. If you look back at our bubble print, okay, we're playing with the same sort of family of colors, pinks, cream, and green, and black. And the placement of the colors and which color is used really changes the look of the entire print. Okay, look at the cream backdrop and look at the black backdrop and see how different those two fabrics look. Okay, so even within your color story, you can keep moving the colors around until you get the effect that you're looking for. Remember in my colors video, I talked a lot about color proportion and how important they are to how effective your color story is in delivering your mood or concept. Just like this, I mean, if you want a heavy, somber palette, you're not going to make your print predominantly baby blue, baby pink with touches of brown. No, you're probably going to make the background brown and with lots of heavy dark blue and light blue elements, right? So again, think about your color proportions and how you're going to place them in your print. So again, you're thinking, I want a heavy color story. I want things to look somber. And then when you're picking your fabrics for the color placement, how is that all going to work together to, again, create the mood that you want for your overall collection? Whew. Okay, I hope that was enough information for you guys to get started on developing your prints for your collection. As usual, if you have any questions, check the info box, check the comments to see if I've already answered your question. I know the comment section of a lot of YouTube channels can be a fraught, kind of dramatic place, but knock on wood, I've been fairly lucky that I have a mostly respectful, awesome, kind, helpful audience. And so, yeah, do a casual scroll through the comments, see if I already answered your question, because, I only answer comments like, once a day or so, so you might get your answer faster that way. Subscriber requests are always welcome. Just keep in mind that the current queue is 14 months long, and I always go in the order of the queue. By popular request, I will be rolling out the fabric series in a few weeks, where in each video, I'm going to go over a category of different fabrics more in depth. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, share, subscribe, like, thumbs up, and all those wonderful ways you guys show me love that I always appreciate. Thank you very much. And I will see you next time.